really should get going.
Is everything all right here?
Look around!
A goddamn deerhead holding an AK-47.
I worked in a design firm.
Shit on a fucking shingle.
Oh. Didn't expect to see me again, did you?
No.
Plowboys, gamblers, cherries.
Stop, please, not doing it.
Four-wheel drive standard. Nathan Wood.
Don't mess up her face.
Just like old Ginger.
I hate a fucking person.
We all did.
Ow! What the fuck are gamblers doing here?
Fuck you.
Once upon a time, in a school in America, kids were happily leaving their classes, thinking it was just another ordinary day. But suddenly, the sky filled with planes that looked like giant birds. These planes began to spray a strange, greenish mist that made everyone cough and feel sick. This was no ordinary fog. It was a poison that spread across the country, making many people fall down and not get up again. Months passed, and the world changed. The government that was supposed to protect everyone seemed to have disappeared. People were scared and had to choose sides. Some formed gangs to protect themselves, while others just wanted to live peacefully. Among these people were Mark and Nina West, a couple who were trying to reach Nina's parents in Milwaukee. They were on the edge of breaking up but still loved each other. As they packed their car with supplies, Mark's friend warned him that the road could be dangerous. But Mark insisted they had to go because he loved Nina deeply. While driving, they heard a radio DJ named Crazy Al warning them about snipers on the roads and telling them to be careful of people dressed like ghosts. They were part of a gang called the Sheets. When they stopped at a garage to fix their car, things took a turn for the worse. A group of tough-looking men burst in, and just as Mark tried to sneak away, a truck crashed through the wall. The men inside started shooting at each other. Mark quickly jumped into his car with Nina, and they sped away just in time. Later that night, they found an empty house to rest in. But as they explored, they discovered something horrifying. 2 bodies lying in bed, looking like they had been through something terrible. While Mark covered them with blankets out of respect, Nina went outside to use their radio to try and contact her mom. She sent a message saying they were on their way, but felt sad because their relationship was rocky. As Mark planned their route, he asked Nina if her dad would give him his special gun, the Wildie Magnum. Nina shrugged. Her dad didn't like Mark much. That night, while they slept, someone watched them from outside. The next day brought more trouble. A gang called the Nailers captured a man nearby and forced him to tell them where to find a woman. The man bravely refused until one of the Nailers threatened him with death. Scared for his life, he revealed that he saw Mark and Nina in the house. When the Nailers arrived at the house looking for them, Mark quickly hid Nina in the attic and gave her a rifle for protection. He armed himself with a screwdriver and waited quietly as the gang searched for them. To calm herself down, Nina put on headphones and listened to music. But one of the Nailers heard her music and came closer. In a flash, Mark jumped out and stabbed one of the intruders right in the head. Then he rushed into the living room where he faced Dean, another Nailer. They fought fiercely until Mark stabbed Dean too. He blinked, but then lay still. With danger behind them for now, Mark and Nina decided it was time to leave again. As they drove away from that scary place, someone watched them through a rifle scope from far away. On the radio, Crazy Al warned everyone about a mysterious figure known as Cherry, who was saving women, but also causing chaos everywhere she went. When Mark and Nina stopped at a grocery store for supplies later on, trouble found them again. A masked man with a gun appeared and ordered Mark to drop his weapon. Mark did what he was told, and when the man took off his mask, he introduced himself as Nathan Wood. Just then, another vehicle pulled up outside. They all ducked behind shelves in fear. As a group of tough-looking men walked toward Mark and Nina, Nathan quietly invited them to dinner at his house later. Just as the gang got closer, a loud bang echoed through the parking lot, and the men fell to the ground, lifeless. Out from behind the counter came Nathan's young son, Stephen, who had been hiding. Nathan urged Mark and Nina to come with them to their home, and they agreed. Nathan and Stephen quickly hooked up their car to a tow truck, but before they could leave, another gang called the Plowboys blocked their way. Plowboy Jim greeted Nathan and then noticed Mark and Nina in the truck. Nathan quickly said they were his friends. Jim showed off a new gun he had taken from a woman named Cherry, whom he called Betsy. He even put a tracking device on her to keep her from escaping. Jim's eyes lingered on Nina, making Nathan uneasy. When Nathan asked Jim to move his truck, Stephen pointed his rifle at Jim, ready to protect his dad. After the Plowboys finally drove away, Nathan led Mark and Nina to his house, unaware that Dean was watching them from a distance. While they waited for dinner, Nathan asked Mark why they had left their home. Mark explained that they were going to live with Nina's parents, but were worried because they hadn't heard from them in weeks. During dinner, Nathan's wife, Teresa, asked about their lives before the planes dropped the chemicals. Nina shared that she worked at a design firm in Minneapolis, while Mark said he was looking for work. After dinner, Mark helped Nathan wash the dishes, while Nina and Teresa played with Nathan's daughter, Bella. Nina opened up about her complicated relationship with Mark. They were going through a divorce before everything changed. Teresa noticed Nina still wore her wedding ring, and Nina said it felt strange to take it off. In the kitchen, Mark joked about trading something for the hamburger steaks they had just eaten. Nathan challenged him to guess what kind of meat it was. When Mark guessed beef, Nathan reminded him that there hadn't been any animals around for a long time. Suddenly, Mark felt sick as he realized Nathan had fed them human meat. He called out for Nina so they could leave, but Nathan threatened them, saying he would kill them and feed them to his family if they tried to escape. Nathan suggested playing a board game to lighten the mood, when suddenly Dean burst into the room with a gun pointed at Bella's head. Dean demanded only Mark and Nina, and in a panic, Nathan agreed to hand them over to save his daughter. As he tried to calm Dean down, Stephen bravely snuck up behind Dean and cut his Achilles tendon with a knife. Mark and Nina seized the chance to run outside as Dean fired his gun. One bullet hit Teresa, causing chaos in the house. Stephen kicked Dean's gun away and stabbed him repeatedly, while Mark and Nina hurried to grab their things from their car still attached to Nathan's truck. Outside in the garage, they found another vehicle and jumped in, just as 2 gunshots rang out behind them. As they drove away, they began blaming each other for their troubles. On a nearby bridge, members of another gang called the Gamblers spotted them. They spun a roulette wheel and fired when it landed on a skull. One bullet hit Nina in the shoulder. Mark quickly turned around and drove in the opposite direction. That night, Nathan called Jim to tell him that Teresa and Bella were dead. He offered Jim a chance at capturing Nina if they could find her first. But when Jim went looking for his men, he found them all dead. Just then, Betsy appeared from behind him and knocked him out with a pipe. With some weapons in hand, Betsy broke down a door to free women held captive by the gang before escaping in a police car. The next morning, Nina woke up in a cabin and found a note from Mark saying he went next door to look for food. She tried to open the door, but found it was booby-trapped, so she climbed out of the window instead. In the garage next door, she was excited to find a working Jeep. Meanwhile, inside the house next door, Mark discovered that Nathan and Stephen were tied up with sacks over their heads. Just as he removed their coverings, an armed man entered the room, pointing a revolver at him. Mark had no choice but to drop his weapon. On her way down the road in her stolen police car, Betsy heard Jim banging on the trunk asking her to let him out. She stopped and shot him in the leg before closing it again. As she moved quietly into the woods after seeing someone there, back inside the house where Mark was held captive, William Cunningham introduced himself as an enemy of Nathan's family. William told Mark that he could either fight Bill, the big guy behind him, or go home without any harm if he tortured Stephen and Nathan instead. In the cozy cabin, Mina began to pack her bags, ready to leave on her own. But then she spotted a note on the turntable asking her to listen to some records. Curious, she found another note on her favorite heavy metal album. It was from Mark, begging her not to give up on their relationship. After a moment, Mina decided to play the record. Outside the cabin, Betsy watched through the door as Mina danced around the room, sipping from a bottle of alcohol. Meanwhile, Mark was facing off against a giant named Bill. Even though Bill looked really strong, Mark decided he would fight him anyway. He kicked Bill in the groin and threw a punch, but Bill blocked it and knocked him down. Bill kicked him in the gut and grabbed him by the throat. Mark managed to headbutt Bill and break free. When Bill tried to put him in a sleeper hold, Mark bit his arm, making Bill throw him at another man named William. Mark and William struggled over a revolver. Mark was quick. He pointed it right at William's face and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Back at the cabin, after Nina fell onto the couch, Betsy returned to her car and shot Jim, who had been causing trouble. Soon after, Mark left the house and said goodbye to Nathan and Stephen. As he walked away, Bill waved at them before heading off in another direction. When Mark returned to the cabin, he found Nina passed out on the couch. He gently carried her to bed. When Nina woke up later, she saw Mark outside practicing his aim with a gun. She asked if she could try too. Mark showed her how to hold the gun properly so she could hit the target. While they were outside together, Betsy snuck into the cabin and found Nina's wedding ring. After their practice session, Nina took Mark to a garage where she discovered an old car. Mark was amazed because it was the same car he used to drive. They shared happy memories as they reminisced about their past and ended up making love in the back seat of that car. But they didn't know that this car belonged to a gang called the Gamblers. Soon enough, the gang entered the garage and captured them. Later, they took Mark and Nina outside and spun a roulette wheel that landed on a spade instead of a skull. Because of this, they put them in a cage and transported them to their headquarters, a motel 45 miles away from Milwaukee. When the gang learned that Mark and Nina were married, they took them to a special room called the Snake Eyes Suite. There was a table with 2 guns on it. They tied one hand of each person to the table and used a drill to attach gloves with revolvers on them. Before long, a man known as the pit boss put 1 bullet in each gun and told them they would have to pull the trigger after he counted down from 5. He warned them that if they didn't pull the trigger, he would add 2 more bullets into each gun. He promised that if they survived 6 rounds, they could go free. Mark told Nina to point her gun down and pull the trigger when he counted down. But Nina stopped him and suggested making things more interesting by putting 3 bullets in Mark's gun instead of 1. The crowd cheered when the pit boss agreed. In the first round, both guns didn't fire at all. The crowd placed bets for what would happen next. During the second countdown, Nina's gun went off and hit Mark in the shoulder. While everyone was distracted by 2 gamblers fighting nearby, Nina seized her chance. She broke free and grabbed the pit boss's gun. In an instant, she shot him and freed Mark from his chair. As they tried to escape, Nina realized that the pit boss was still alive. She quickly shot him in the head, just as Wanda, a member of their gang, gave them some time to run away. But once outside, snipers tried to shoot at them until Betsy came in and took them out. Nina quickly helped Mark into a vehicle and drove away just as more gamblers came out of the motel shooting at them, but missing completely. Wanda ordered her crew to get ready so they could chase after them. The couple finally reached Milwaukee, only for Nina to discover heartbreaking news. Both her parents had died. Connie, their neighbor, explained that her father had been very sick for some time before passing away, and soon after that, her mother followed him into death. Connie handed Nina a letter that they found in her mother's hand. It was a sad moment, but Nina knew she had to keep going. Later, Connie, Dale, and Winston took took Nina to the end of the street to show her something important. They pointed out a tripwire set up with explosives to stop big vehicles. Dale explained how it worked, and just then, their neighbor Phil came over to welcome Nina back home. But things were about to get more complicated. Betsy arrived in the neighborhood and sneaked into a house across the street to keep an eye out for the gamblers, who were bad news. At that same time, a couple with their daughter Cynthia knocked on Nina's door. They brought her some food and wanted to welcome her back. When Nina took the food into the kitchen, she noticed Phil talking into his walkie-talkie. That made her feel uneasy. Nina called out to Phil, but he quickly walked back to his house. Curious, she followed him and overheard a man on the walkie-talkie telling Phil he was just a minute away. Suddenly, Nina heard the sound of the gamblers arriving. She ran back home and spotted Cynthia riding her bike in the street. Nina quickly grabbed Cynthia and rushed inside. Once they were safe, Nina grabbed some weapons and warned Mark that Phil had betrayed them. As the gamblers got out of their vehicles, Nina took a deep breath and fired the first shot, hitting one of them. The gang shot back, but Betsy jumped in with a machine gun and took them down. The surviving gamblers ducked behind their vehicles and tried to fight back. While Nina loaded her gun, one of the gamblers snuck up behind her. But Mark was quick. He shot him from the window just in time. Suddenly, Cynthia ran out of the house, and Mark tried to chase after her. But then a gambler grabbed him from behind and tried to choke him. In a fierce struggle, Mark used his strength to grab the horn on the gambler's mask and stabbed him in the eye with it. Outside, Betsy realized she had been hit in the stomach during all the chaos. Just then, another gang called the Plowboys showed up in a truck looking for Betsy. Nina raced toward the tripwire and reset it just before the truck reached their house. The Plowboys crashed through a barricade and started shooting at the gamblers in their way. When the truck hit the tripwire, it exploded. The blast flipped it over. Wanda, one of the last remaining gamblers, told another gambler to hold down the street while she went after Nina. But Winston shot him before he could do anything. In retaliation, Wanda killed Winston as she headed toward Nina's house. Meanwhile, Betsy managed to get inside and handed Nina's wedding ring to Mark. But just as Mark took it from her hand, Wanda burst in and shot Betsy right in the head. Wanda pumped her shotgun and got ready to shoot Mark when suddenly Nina came back into the room and killed Wanda. Nina was furious now. She stormed over to Phil's house looking for revenge, but found out he was already dead. She noticed a gambler tattoo on his arm and saw her father's Wildy Magnum lying on his table. On her way home, she spotted Cynthia riding her bike again as her mother came out to get her. When Nina returned home, she gave Mark the Wildy Magnum as he put her wedding ring back on her finger. With everything that had happened weighing heavily on them, they decided it was time to find a new place to live. As they drove away from their old life behind them, Crazy Al came on the radio, warning everyone about a couple who had taken down a whole group of gamblers in Milwaukee. It was clear that their story was far from over. They were ready for whatever came next.